Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel and another tutorial. This tutorial is a little different as I have already done the Magdalena circle bag as a tutorial. I will put that tutorial down in the description below. I did it a year or so ago, but I had posted a video on flat bottomed Magdalena bag, and I have had such great response of emails and messages and comments saying please put out a tutorial for a flat bottomed one. So that is what I've done, and this is what we have made here. So this is what we're going to do in the tutorial. I was going to do a mini tutorial, but I did a full tutorial, including showing the binding of this bag. So yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun planning this bag out at the beginning of this week. I actually did a live cut and chat where on the live, we went through and decided the fabric combinations for this. So I had lots of help trying to decide where to put black and red and what colors to use from all my subscribers. It was really fun. I think I might do that again. So everything in here is the same materials we used in the Magdalena circle bag. The only difference is I've added purse feet to the flat bottom. Of course, there's some Decovil Heavy in the bottom. I also added 2 layers of Decovil Lite out of the seam line allowances in the top zipper panel, just because I find that it sometimes sinks in on itself, and I'm hoping that that'll help alleviate that. But yeah, so yeah, this was a lot of fun. So I once again want to thank Alexis of Oro Rosa Patterns for allowing me to do tutorials on her patterns. This is a modification. This is not in the pattern, this bottom piece change that I've done. You will need the pattern in order to make this, and in the tutorial I explain how to modify your pattern pieces to accommodate a flat bottomed bag. Materials I used in this, my vinyl is Daytona upholstery vinyl from Fabricville. The white vinyl is the Rex faux leather in white from Emmeline Bags. My zippers and zipper pulls are from Blue Calla, and the rest of the hardware is from Emmeline Bags. My front panel and my coffee bean lining I got on clearance at a quilt shop here in town. They're Riley Blake fabrics. What else? Yeah, Decovil Heavy, Decovil Lite. Yeah, if you need either of those and you're in Canada, I do have them on my website. I can only ship and sell to Canada, but if you're a Canadian and you need that, all that information is below. Well, without further ado, how about we get to making this flat bottom Magdalena bag?
Okay, so you are going to need some number 5 zipper tape, some bias tape. I used the double folded extra wide, a slider for the crossbody strap, 2 swivel clasps for the crossbody strap, now I am doing my straps so they flop down. Usually I would use 1-inch rectangular rings. I didn't have any in those in my stash, so I'm going to use D-rings instead. So you're going to need those plus 2 more D-rings for your crossbody strap. I got 4 strap ends for my straps, 3 number 5 zipper pulls, 4 purse feet, okay, and I am going to do my slip pocket and my zipper pocket different than what's in the pattern because I do all of my bags the same way. So you're going to need your slip pocket piece and your zipper pocket lining piece. All of my fabrics are backed with SF 101 for my cotton fabrics. Your crossbody strap, your exterior and lining gusset pieces, as well as a 6 by 3¼ inch piece of Decovil Heavy. Your zipper panels, you got the 2 exterior zipper panels, your 2 lining zipper panels. And I'm going to try this out. I don't know if it'll work, but I put 2 layers of Decovil Lite out of the seam allowances on my exterior zipper panels. And they're 1 1/8 inch thick or wide. Okay, so this was another modification I didn't say in the introduction because I like my bag handles to flop down, so I'm going to show you how I achieved that in this video as well. So these are those pieces. These are cut 2 to 9 inches. And then I have my 2, there we go, I'm showing you 2 to 9 inches is what I cut here. And then my 2 handles, I cut 4 to 18 inches. My original tutorial does show how to do the straps the Oro Rosa way. Okay, 2 connector pieces for your crossbody strap. Okay, your 2 lining pieces. Again, these are backed with medium woven interfacing, SF101 in this case. And your 2 exterior pieces, which are backed with Decovil Heavy out of the seam allowances. Now, how to get this shape? This is what's going to obtain our flat bottom. What you're going to do is you're going to take your pattern piece and you're going to fold up 1 inch from the bottom of the pattern piece. Now, these pattern pieces are cut on the fold. I actually printed out 2 so I can lay them flat. But this is what they would look like as you printed them up. So you just fold or cut off the bottom 1 inch of the pattern piece or fold it up. You will also have to do the same thing with your slip pocket lining pieces and exterior pieces. Fold it up that 1 inch. So you need 2 exterior pieces and 2 lining pieces for your front and back pocket. Okay, and you will do the same with your overlay pattern pieces, but fold up 1 3/8 of an inch on that bottom piece before you cut them. You can see how my Decovil Heavy is out of the seam allowances. You'll do the same with the Decovil Heavy stabilizer piece. All right, so I'm going to go ahead off camera and do my crossbody strap and my handles. You can find the class down below. Now let's do the connectors. These are going to be done the same way. So for my crossbody connectors, I'm going to use some double-sided tape like I always do. And then fold in the long edges into the center line that I've drawn on all my pieces. Now my crossbody connector pieces, I cut them just a little longer than the pattern. That's more my preference. I like to have a little bit extra so I can catch them with my rivets later on. Okay, and now for those 4 handle connectors, we are not going to be top stitching the handle connectors. They are done the exact same way as these. But our crossbody straps, we go ahead and we top stitch them with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance down each side. Okay, now to finish off our crossbody connectors, a little piece of double-sided tape helps here. Put your D-ring on and fold it wrong sides together in half, just like so. And you can set those aside for now. Okay, so with our finished connectors, again, these are not top stitched, but they are done folding the long sides into the center like we did with the other one. We are going to go 2.5 inches on the right side, just mark it with chalk. Add a little bit of double-sided tape on the same side that we just marked with the chalk. Grab your rectangular ring, or in my case the D-ring because I don't have any rectangular rings. Slide it on and bend it over right at that 2.5 inch mark we just made. Try to keep it as even as you possibly can here and stick it together. And then on the back for future use, we're just going to put a 4 or 5 inch strip of tape here. So you want to make sure that all these connectors are the same size. And then from this folded edge, you're going to make a 1 inch mark line. And this is going to be a guide for where we are going to stitch it when we stitch this to the panels of the bag. Okay, so I've gone ahead, I found the center, which is about 4 3/4 in from each side and 1 inch up from the bottom. And this is going to help us with our placement of our handles. So from that center line and 1 inch up from the bottom, 2 inches from that center line on the left and right is where we are going to place our straps. So I've taken the tape off, or the paper off the back of my double-sided tape, and I am just using my ruler to line it up nice and even, 2 inches to the right of that center line. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same with the other side, 1 inch up, 2 inches over from that center line, and stick down my other connector using my ruler as a guide to get it nice and straight. Just like that. And these should be 2 inches apart from one another. So you would go ahead and do the exact same thing with the other panel. Okay, if your marks have washed away, make sure you add them again. We are going to go up here, across here, and back down with a 1/8 of an inch top stitch. Okay, make sure when you go to pivot that you put your needle down. And you will do this exact same thing with all 4 of the connectors. Okay, so now that we have that done, we are going to add the handle overlay piece. So I'm just going to take some double-sided tape outside of the seam allowances. And then we are going to stick it onto the bottom of the bag, lining up the bottom edge nice and center. And stick it down. And all this does is hides that raw edge of our connectors. Because these are vinyl, we don't have to hide the raw edge, but this is just makes it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing when you're looking into that pocket. Okay, and then we are going to go and baste this on with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here and top stitch across here with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on both pieces. Now on the connectors, at the start and stop of the connectors, I just like to do little back stitches just to give the connectors a little more stability. All right, there we go. Now I'm just going to mark with my erasable pen where I want to place my rivets. and then I will go ahead and install those rivets. Okay, so now let's make our lining, our front pocket pieces. So make sure you know which two pieces you're using for your exterior. Put the exterior and the lining piece right sides together and clip along the top. And then we're going to go and sew across here with the 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to take my pinking shears and trim this down to a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance just to make it so we can turn this nice curve nice and flush and even. So take your two pieces, put them wrong sides together. And because I'm using cotton, I'm actually going to take this to my iron and I'm going to press that seam nice and flat. Then I'm going to go ahead, top stitch and baste around the sides. Again, make sure your top stitching is good on both sides because this part will be visible on both sides of the bag along that top stitch. And I do love to chain stitch. This helps me save on wasting thread, so that's what I'm doing with these pieces. All right, now that that's done, we're going to take one of our main panels and we are going to put our pocket piece on top and line up our center pieces here, or centers. Having that flat edge makes this so easy to make sure that this is nice and straight. Okay, and then we're going to baste this on with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on both panels. All right, so I also went ahead and put my nameplate on, and I always put a piece of duct tape on the back to protect the lining. Okay, so you can see how we have a little bit of a gape here on the pockets. That is good. That is what we want. Just a slight gape. Now we are going to take our lining pieces. I already did my pockets because I do them different than the pattern. I do have a class down below if you want to see how I do my zipper pocket. The only difference is my zipper pocket is closed on the bottom. Okay, so now we are going to take our lining panel and our main panel and we are going to put them wrong sides together like this. Now I like my zipper pocket to be at the back of the bag, so I am putting this panel wrong sides together with the back panel, exterior back panel. Matching up my centers. Okay, and then we are going to baste these together with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Do the same with the other side. Wrong sides together. Okay, so our main panels are done. Now we are going to work on our gusset piece. So we're going to take our exterior gusset piece, find the centers. You can see how I have my Decovil Lite outside of the seam allowances. Just do some small snips within the seam allowances so you know where your center is. Now for my Decovil Heavy piece, I cut 6 by 3 1/4 inches. I end up trimming off 1/4 inch when I see it's a little bit past my Decovil Lite pieces, so cut these to 6 3 inches. So find the centers of this piece. And I am going to go ahead and fuse this on centered to the exterior gusset piece. Okay, so for my placement of my purse feet, from the long edge of the vinyl gusset, I'm going 1 1/4 inches up. And from the sides of the Decovil Heavy piece, I'm going 1 inch in. I found this to be good placement for these feet. So I went ahead and marked 4 marks for all of those purse feet. And I'm going to go ahead and install them. You can find my class below if you need to learn how to do that. Okay, and again, I put some duct tape on the back of those just to make it a little more secure. Okay, so for our zipper panels, I've done my zipper tape already. I put a little tack stitch at the end of my zipper tape because I cut my zipper tape just a little bit longer so I can have my my pulls out of the way when I'm doing my stitching, like so. Okay, so on my lining piece right side up on one of them, I'm going to take some double-sided tape and put it along the top. And then with my lining piece right side up and my zipper right side up, I'm going to line up the top raw edge of my zipper to my lining piece. Now you can see my zipper is longer. That is okay because we will cut that to length later on. Now we're going to take our exterior piece, do the same thing with our double-sided tape, but this time we are going to put this right sides together with the zipper and the lining piece, sandwiching the zipper in between the two panels. And then we're going to sew across here with our zipper fit on the machine with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. The zipper fit helps a lot to ensure not getting a wavy zipper because you can get nice and close to the teeth. Then I'm going to take some more double-sided tape and I'm going to put it along that seam that we just sewn. And then I'm going to push our exterior zipper panel away from the zipper using the tape to hold it in place. Then I'm going to repeat with the lining side. And then we are going to top stitch along the zipper and baste the other 3 edges together. First, because this top stitching is going to show, I sometimes like to just double check my tension to make sure it hasn't been thrown off, so I know I have a really nice top stitch. And then once we're done this, we're going to rinse and repeat with the other side of the zipper and the other 2 panels. Okay, so that's all done. So now what we want to do is move our zipper pulls into the center, and then we can cut our zipper even with our zipper panels. Okay, and then we are going to take our crossbody strap connectors, and you are going to lay it with 1 inch hanging from the end into the center of the pull, so 1 inch from the fold of the D-ring to the raw edge of our zipper panel. That's about where I like to have it. And you want it centered with the zipper, and then just use a couple clips to hold it in place. Again, my connectors are longer than what's in the pattern. I just like to cut mine just a little bit longer so I have a little more to work with. And you do the same on the other side, from the fold to the raw edge of the zipper panel, 1 inch, and secure with clips. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to baste both of these onto the zipper panels. So here we go. Okay, so now the gusset. What we're going to do is take our lower gusset panel, and we are going to line up the short edges of our zipper panel and the gusset panel. They should be the same width. And then we're going to take our lining panel, right sides together with the lining side of the zipper panel. And what we've done here is we have sandwiched our zipper panel in between our exterior and our lining, and we have sewn it with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to, once again, use my double-sided tape to help with doing my top stitching and holding everything in place, as I cannot iron vinyl. So I'm going to pull this nice and taut away from there. Flip it over and do the same on the lining side. Just like so. And then we're going to go ahead and top stitch with the 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here, and also installing a rivet, making sure not to go through the lining piece, just through the exterior and the connector piece. So here we go. I've also put a little piece of Decovil Heavy in behind my rivet just to give a little extra stability. Now we are going to do the other side, making a loop. So our exterior piece is right sides together. Then we're going to loop around our lining piece to right sides together with the lining side of our zipper panel. And you can see how we have created, make sure they're nice and even. And you can see we have created 2 loops, just like so. So we're going to go ahead and sew across there with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to go over my connectors a couple times. Okay, now top stitching with this is a little trickier. So you're going to pull your lining piece back, like you're going to try to bring your lining pieces and your exterior pieces right sides together. So you're going to be forming a circle, or wrong sides together. So once you've done that, and you'll be kind of inside out, and then you're just going to flip it around right side out with our lining pieces and our exterior pieces wrong sides together. And then you are going to top stitch right across here, just kind of holding everything in place, working with the loop. Okay, and then you're going to go ahead and you are going to install your rivet here, making sure not to get that lining piece. Okay, so that's all done. So now all that's left to do with this outskirts of our bag is to baste our lining and our exterior pieces together, just to make things easier when we go to connect it to the exterior panels of the bag. This will help ensure that nothing gets flopped out of the way and ends up not being caught in any of the stitching. So you'll do this with both sides. Just like that, and then repeat with the other side of the gusset. Okay, so we have our gusset and zipper panel done. Now we want to find the centers of our zipper panel, so I'm just lining up our seams where our gusset and our zipper panel meet, and that will give us the center of our zipper panel. We should already have our bottoms marked from when we put on our Decovil Heavy piece, but just double check that we are still center, which we are. Okay, so we're going to take one of our exterior main panels. We are going to turn our gusset piece wrong side out, lay it on top of our exterior main panel, and we are going to line up the bottom centers, so our flat edges. Find your center points that we had snipped. And do not be afraid to use lots of wonder clips to hold everything in place. Believe it or not, we are almost done. So once you have a few clips in there, find your center top and the center of your zipper panel and match them up. And then once that's done, in between those clips, go ahead and evenly distribute your fabric all the way around, clipping the gusset and the main panels together. All the way around. As you can see, I do use lots of clips. You really don't want it to shift. And then we're going to sew all the way around here with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I'm sure everybody can see my little Groot in the corner there. My dad 3D printed that little guy for me. I think he's just adorable, and he's now my little mascot for my sewing machine. Now when you get to where our corners are, where before our bag curves up, make sure when you get to that corner that you put your needle down and then pivot your bag. Make sure your needle is down for sure. You want to get a nice sharp corner right there and on the other side as well. Now I find it a lot easier to undo the zipper when it comes to the zipper panel. It just gives a little more flexibility in the material to work your needle around. You will find this is a very stiff bag to work with, especially when it comes to turning it out. Now you can see that my lining panels must have shrunk up a little bit, are a little shorter than my exterior pieces were, but I'm not too worried about that because they are within the seam allowance, and when we do our 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, it catches it all in there. A great thing about a binding finish is that doesn't have to be perfect because it's all going to get caught and none of it's going to be noticeable. So right here, once again, I put my needle down before I pivoted. And that's one panel on and complete. So this you just want to kind of go around, make sure everything was caught on the inside there, which we are good. And then you go ahead and you do the exact same process with the other panel. Okay, so we have both panels sewn together here. I'm just feeling inside of that panel I just sewn on to make sure everything was caught and that everything feels good, and we're good. And now it's time to bind this bag. So I don't make my own binding. I just buy the extra wide double fold bias tape from my local fabric store. It works just great. Make sure it is double fold. You need it to be double fold. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to, on one end of your tape, fold it out flat and fold into the center about 1/2 inch or 1 inch or so, like so. And then we're going to take that unfolded raw edge and we are going to put it up against one of our main panels. And start clipping it around, matching the raw edge of our bias tape and the raw edge of our bag. You can see how my bias tape is all unfolded right now, and that is what we want. Again, use lots of clips around here. Now when I get to my corner here, my bias tape doesn't want to go all the way around very well, so I'm going to go ahead and take my scissors, and right on that corner I'm just going to do a itty bitty snip, like not even 1/8 of an inch, just to help bring it around that corner. Like that. And then continue clipping in this manner all the way around this side of the bag. You can see how thick some of these layers are getting though. Now it helps when you're doing binding to make sure that your thread matches your binding tape, mainly because sometimes binding, the stitching isn't beautiful, but if it's the same color, you won't notice if you've gone off kilter anywhere. Okay, and again we're reaching that corner, so I'm going to put that little snip right at that corner so I can bring my bias tape around that corner nice and sharp. Okay, so now we're back to where we started. We are going to want to overlap the ending of our tape over the beginning of our bias tape, like so. Make sure they are overlapping by about 1.5 inches or so. Okay, and then we're going to take this to the machine and stitch it with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I like to do this with my main panel on the bed of the machine, but that's also where our bias tape is. So you're going to have to be very aware of your bias tape to make sure it's not folding up into the seam. We only want to get that straight edge. So you're going to see me go around and stop about, I don't know, every 5 or 6 clips or so to feel where my bias tape is, to make sure it is lying flat along the bottom of my bag and not getting caught up, the other side of my bias tape not getting caught up into my stitching here. That opposite side of the bias tape is what we are going to bring around, fold it, and bring it around the other side to enclose that raw edge. So you definitely do not want it getting caught in our stitching that we're doing with this one. So again, we're doing this stitching with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. When you get to that corner, make sure you put your needle down, check your bias tape there to make sure it's nice and flat, and then pivot and continue around the bag. Take this process nice and slow. There's nothing worse than having to pick out bias tape because it's been caught up or hasn't been caught the way it's supposed to be in our sewing. So all I'm doing is sticking my hand under the machine and smoothing out the tape about every 5 or 6 clips or so, just to make sure the free edge of the tape is not getting caught up in our stitching here. Again, when you're checking your bias tape, make sure you put your needle down before you go to adjust anything. Also, make sure you have a full bobbin when you start doing this, because there's nothing worse than getting done your binding and finding out that you sewed nothing. Okay, we're to that corner again, so needle down, check my bias tape, pivot, and work my way across. Back stitching when we get to the end. You can see our free end is all free. Yay! Okay, so now what we want to do is, now you can see how our bias tape folds down to the center. We want that because we want that folded edge to be around the other side. But we kind of have to nest the inside piece of bias tape where we overlapped inside the other one. So kind of match up the edges and bring the folded edges down. So we are not working with a raw edge of the bias tape this time. Our bias tape is actually folded in, so we're working with a folded edge. Make sure that your bias tape on the right here is folded into the center of the bias tape. And then bring that fold up and over the other side of the seam we're binding, like so, and secure with clips. So see how it's folded into the center of a bias tape, and once that's done, then you can bring it up and over. And you want to go around on that opposite side and just make sure everything was caught in our sewing as well as we go along here. Right in here, make sure it's all caught because that side is already all sealed up. Just make sure nothing has been left out. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to flip it all around because it just makes it easier to work with. Again, making sure our bias tape, the raw edge of the bias tape is folded to the center of the bias tape, and then that fold is brought over to enclose our raw edge. See, binding is not a scary thing at all. It's actually fairly easy. Okay, and I can see that I'm all good on this side, so my stitching was good the first round. And again, use lots of clips. Now, if you're using waterproof canvas to bind this, you could have a raw edge. You could just fold it in half. I don't like the raw edge of waterproof canvas, and waterproof canvas can just make the seam this seam even thicker. So I prefer to use cotton bias tape to do this. So I don't have a raw edge. I have my nice folded down seam, and it's not as thick as it would be with another textile. Okay, and now we're going to go and stitch all the way around with a 3/8 of an inch. So I have my zipper fit on here, and I'm going to line it up right up against where our folded edge of our binding is here, and stitch all the way around 1/8 of an inch away from that binding, or 3/8 of an inch in. I honestly don't look for the 3/8 of an inch in. I just follow the binding all the way around with 1/8 of an inch top stitch type idea. Again, when you get to the corners, make sure you put needle down and pivot. It helps to use a stiletto here to keep our binding in place, because sometimes it wants to kind of meander out of where it should be sitting. But with this big bag, it seems that everything stays in place nice, so it's really good. Again, pivot, or needle down, pivot, and then finish it off with a back stitch. That's one side done. Go ahead and do the exact same thing with the other side. Okay, so we have our bag all bound. Look at, and you can see my stitching's pretty good, but this is why you would also want to make sure it's the same color as your binding. If it looks good, go ahead and start turning your bag right side out. Now this is really stiff because it is almost all Decovil Heavy as the stabilizer. One thing to make sure is that your stabilizer has set really well. Make sure you've at least had it sitting for like half hour to an hour before working with it and wanting to turn it around, just to make sure it is adhered properly. Now this bag takes me about 3.5 to 4 hours to make, so my Decovil Heavy was more than set by the time it came to turning this bag around. So push out all your seams, double check all around the seams that everything was caught and we have no raw edges showing through or stitching showing through. If there was a raw edge, you could always turn it back around and just give it a little bigger of a seam allowance to hide that raw edge, but I ended up doing pretty good. And then just kind of shape it all around the piping, which gives it a nice shape. And there we have it. All that's left to do now is to install your handles, which I will rivet on.
All right, that's it. That's all. See, it really wasn't all that different from the original pattern, just a few little modifications, and it comes together really, really nice and fast. I just love it with the flat bottom. Anyways, I hope this tutorial was helpful. I hope it was what everybody had requested. So many emails and requests for me to do this. So I hope that I did it justice and that everybody got something from it. If you like this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, or you can get me on social media or by email. All that information is down below in the description. Anyways, until the next one, see ya. Bye.